All right, Shalom. There's the brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rukah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word, in all truth and in sincerity. Yahweh is the name of the one they ignorantly call God. Yahweh Shai is the name of the one they ignorantly call Jesus. Bahashem is in the name. Rakah is spirit. Kodash is holy. Akyam is brothers. Akwath is sisters. Shalom means peace. And Yashar Allah is Israel in the ancient Paleo Hebrew. This is Isaiah chapter 14 and verse 9. And it reads, Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? This is Revelation chapter 11 and verse 14. And it reads, The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. Now I want to go into a lesson based on this article. All right, going into the situation that is increasing concerning tension, all right, in Africa. Now, we know, according to the scriptures, the biblical nationality or the biblical name for that land is Ham, the land of Chum, all right, Hum or Chum, all right. This is where the so-called black conscious get the word Kemetic. It actually goes back to Chum, all right, which is the biblical nationality, all right, of the African tribes, if you will, all right. Now, going into this region, all right, this region was conquered by the so-called white man and split apart. Different land masses that identify themselves as Germans, French, British, all right, and other Edomite or so-called white people in these different lands carved up the land of Africa, if you will, and colonized it. Now we're in a new age through the spirit where, you know, the present order, the order that every other nation has accepted for a long time is now coming to an end. All right. And you can tell by how intense the resistance is becoming. All right. For a while, Esau, the so-called white man, had a grip on the world that didn't have any resistance, that didn't have any other nation of people speaking against it or actively resisting it. Now you're starting to see this increase everywhere. All right. This is Obadiah. And I'll just jump down to verse 2. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. All right. And that is the sentiment amongst the other nations concerning the so-called white man. Now, what you notice is they'll focus on the West. All right. They'll say the so-called white men in the West, whether it's America, France, Germany, all right, Britain. But ultimately, you know, the nations are beginning to realize that a nation of people is ruling over them in anger, as the scriptures describe it in Isaiah the 14th chapter, and they're beginning to resist. All right. Now, let me go here. Let's read some of this article. All right. It's U.S. France threatened intervention in resource-rich Niger or Niger, fears of war in West Africa. All right. It says following anti-colonial coups, the U.S. and France threatened intervention to reinstall a pro-Western regime in Niger, which produces uranium needed for nuclear energy and hosts strategic U.S. drone bases. Now, for those who don't know, all right, Esau has been very cunning in the way he has claimed and maintained dominion in the earth. All right, now he's done it through a monetary system. All right, and this is why, you know, it shows it's mentioning the pro-Western regimes, because basically what Esau will do is he'll go into a nation. All right. He'll offer them loans that they can't pay back. All right. And if they refuse, all right, they'll they'll install somebody, a politician, all right, a president that is loyal to them ultimately. So if you have some Hamite, all right, some so-called African leader who doesn't want to, Salakia, who doesn't want to play ball what they'll do is they'll raise up a coup and they'll take over that land, or they'll take over that regime and set up a puppet. All right. The most notable one in recent history has been the one in Libya with Gaddafi, who was about to not only try to unite the African currency, but try to back it up by gold. All right. So they have an MO. All right. They'll send a businessman, or they'll send a representative into the land and say, look, we'll give you this loan to build up infrastructure, knowing that the loan has high interest rates and they can't pay it back. And once they can't pay it back, they start to pull resources, or they'll say you can't nationalize your resources. All right. And what that means is basically when you nationalize the resources, the profits go to the people. All right. So that's just a sub note, a quick summary, if you will, of what's going on and generally speaking, how Esau does policy in Africa in particular, because that's a nation that's rich in resources. So what they try to do is they try to make sure that they're not manufacturing. All right. They're not able to actually capitalize off of the resources that they have, but that they basically just pull it out of the ground and give it to the so-called white man for pennies on the dollar. All right. Now let's continue. It says the U.S. and France have threatened foreign intervention to reinstall a pro-Western regime in Niger. Niger is a major producer of gold and uranium, the latter of which is needed for European nuclear energy. The country has significant oil reserves to which foreign corporations have wanted access. It also hosts large U.S. drone bases. These Western threats follow coups led by nationalists, anti-colonial military officers in neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali, whose governments have warned that intervention would be considered an act of war and could thus set off a regional conflict. All right, so what you see going on in Burkina Faso and Mali, all right, let me jump down to a map so you can get an idea. All right, so if we go here, this is Burkina Faso. All right. It's a little piece of land right here in the middle. I'm trying to zoom in so you can get an idea. And then you have Mali, which is right next to it. So that bigger portion is Mali. The smaller one is Burkina Faso. Now, they have successfully removed the pro-Western government. All right. They've successfully removed them, and they've set up a government that's basically backed by the people. So 73% of the people, all right, in Niger, all right, in particular, are loyal to the coup. All right. And this is the land of Niger. All right. It's this big one. All right. So what you have is these so-called African nations beginning to resist the grip that the so-called white man has had in their lands, because they're resource rich, but their nation doesn't benefit from it. What Esau does is he pays a few Hamites very well. All right. You have a few Hamites that are billionaires, and basically they're paying those guys to basically make sure that the money doesn't go to the people. It goes to Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, and the people of the land don't actually benefit. And this is why you have these coups over and over again in this land, because that's how Esau keeps the price of the minerals low. All right. He installs a puppet. All right. And whenever that puppet gets removed, they'll pay money for a rebel. All right. Or another coup. Or they'll try to bribe the one that's in charge that took over. So this is a reoccurring theme, because what the so-called white man won't tell you about them trying to go green, all right, whether it's electrical vehicles or they're trying to do all of these alternatives, all right, to weaken the carbon footprint. What they're not telling you is that the land of Africa has to be in a poor condition indefinitely for them to pull that off and make money. They're not going to tell you that part, because ultimately they're really selling this go green situation so that they can monitor and basically have more control over the people. But they're not telling you that economically speaking, Africa as a landmass has to be poor for this to be possible. All right. When you look up cobalt and you look up lithium, these are mineral rich necessities for this EV cars and all of these Teslas and all of these different situations to blossom and to flourish, it requires Africa to be in a destitute state, because these big corporations have to have those minerals pulled out of the ground and sold to them at pennies on the dollar, which basically means the so-called African people in those lands don't benefit. All right, so this is why you're seeing this resistance, and this is why you see the U.S. and France trying to intervene. A big reason why they're doing that is because, again, they need those, especially France. They need this. All right. So I'm going to go up because it's going to touch on that in this article. All right. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to keep going where I left off. All right. It says these Western threats follow coups led by nationalist anti-colonial military officers in neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali, whose governments have warned that intervention would be considered an act of war and could thus set off a regional conflict. West Africa is rich in natural resources. It is also very strategic for the United States and France. All right. For those people who think that it's just a so-called white man in America, you are sadly mistaken. All right. It is, because if you ask the French, they'll say the Americans are the problem. But look at what they're doing to the land as well. That shows you that these are all Edomites. Whether they call themselves French, British, German, they're all Edomites. All right, so let's go back to Obadiah 1:1. The vision of Obadiah, thus saith the Lord, power concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Because when you look at it, Esau has set up a very complex system to maintain dominance. And now you have nations across the planet that are resisting that system. All right. Now, keep in mind, the Russians are still Edomites. All right. Even though they're presenting themselves as another option for these other nations, they're still Edomites at the end of the day. All right. Now, I want to go back to this article. Matter of fact, before I do that, let's jump down to verse 6. It said, you know what? Let's start at 5. If thieves came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen till they had enough? If the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. So while Esau thought that he was going to be able to do this forever, the other nations were moving things around and preparing themselves to break free from his bonds. China's a perfect example. Everything being made in China is a product of Esau's greed, pushing all the jobs over to that land. Now we're in a situation where nations, multiple nations of people, Moab, all right, Ham, Ishmael are all starting to rise up and look for other options to get around this system that was created to benefit these Edomites, the so-called white man, particularly those in the West. Now, when we go back to this article, it says this, all right, because it's going to point out something very important, which is that France plays a major role in what's going on in West Africa. All right, it says still today, France maintains neo-colonial policies, effectively controlling West African economies by forcing them to use the CFA franc as their national currency. Senegalese development economist Dango Sambasila described the CFA franc as a colonial currency, born of France's need to foster economic integration among the colonies under its administration, and thus control their resources, economic structures, and political systems. See, when the American news points out what's going on in West Africa, they paint it like these people don't have a reason to do this. They're just doing this out of sheer rebellion, not understanding what's actually playing out. And that's why articles like this are important through the spirit, because it allows you to understand the thought process behind why these things are happening in these lands, man. Esau's not judging the land right. And that's being made clear. All right. Scriptures say let's get it. This is Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. All right. Also, Wisdom of Solomon chapter 6 and verse 3. All right. And it reads, for power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest, who shall try your works and search out your counsels. Because being ministers of his kingdom, ye have not judged aright, nor kept the law, nor walked after the counsel of Yahweh Shema Shai. Now that first applies to us because the world is our inheritance. All right. But it's obvious that Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, has control of the earth, but he's not judging aright. All right. And that's why you see all of this resistance. All right. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right. Now continuing, it says this. Paris dictates the monetary policies and even holds much of the foreign exchange reserves of numerous West African nations, including Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. The CFA franc is a barrier to industrialization and structural transformation in these countries, explains Sela, who characterized it as a neo-colonial device that continues to destroy any prospect of economic development in user nations. All right. And this is Esau making a very complex system. All right. To maintain dominance. Just like in America, Esau doesn't have Jim Crow laws. Now he uses the criminal justice system. All right. To maintain that dominance over Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. The same thing is happening across the world. He's created another system where at face value, it doesn't look like he's controlling the world, but he is. And this is why you see this resistance, because these nations who have to feed their people are looking at these numbers, and it's very obvious. It's crazy. All right, continuing, it says the United States has one of its largest and most important drone bases in Niger, the Air Base 201, which costs $110 million to build and an additional $20 to $30 million per year to maintain, in one of the poorest countries on earth. So think about it. This country is poor as hell. All right. One of the poorest countries on the planet. But you have a nation of people who can build $110 million base on it, knowing these people are poor, pull out all of their resources and make sure that the people themselves don't even prosper or don't even benefit from the resources that are in their own land. And it shows you, what did the scriptures say? Shall not all these take up a proverb against you, man? It's wicked, man. All right. But what Esau does is he tries to make this so complicated that people don't even want to go through the work of understanding how wicked this nigga really is, man. Excuse my French. All right. This Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay? Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee? And thou shalt be for booties unto them. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. All right. And it shows you that Esau's grip is continuing to be maintained through these different systems that he calls a different name, but it's still him maintaining his power, man. And these nations are waking up to it according to the Spirit of the Lord. The Lord appointed certain times. All right. Like it says in Revelation 17 concerning the allies of America, that the Lord put it in their spirit to give their power over to the beast. All right. Until his word be fulfilled. And now we're in that time where the elect are being sealed. And now the Lord's beginning to allow the floodgates to open. And that's why you see this isn't an isolated incident. You still have the South China Sea. You still have what's going on in the Middle East. You still have what's going on in Ukraine, which has become normal to people. All of these are different hotspots with the same common denominator. Nations rising up against the current power structure. All right, continuing. It says this. Niger is geostrategically important for the Pentagon's Africa strategy. It is located in the middle of Sahel, a region with a lot of U.S. and French military activity, where thousands of troops are stationed on a regular basis. Washington uses its drone bases in Niger, in the heart of Sahel, to try to exercise military dominance in North and West Africa, in coordination with the forces that U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, has deployed across the continent. Now, man, so you can see why the people, because there's an article that shows 73% of the people in the land of Niger support the so-called rebel government. Why? Because that rebel government is for the people. The government that was in place before basically pulled out all of the resources and riches of that nation, gave it to the so-called white man, and were taking bribes to do it, while the so-called white man basically has control over their country. And like other nations across the planet, they're tired of it. That's why Isaiah the 14th chapter is beautiful, because it says the chief ones, the dead ones, the chief ones of all the nations are beginning to rise up. In Habakkuk the 2nd chapter, shall not they all spoil you? Shall not they all vex you? Not just a taunting proverb, but they're putting actions behind their words. And Russia is being a guard unto these nations to give them the ability to do so. Because in these lands, you have a private military group out of Russia called Wagner, or Wagner. I think that's how you pronounce it in that language. But it's basically the Wagner, which is basically a private military group, all right, from out of Russia, which a lot of these nations have allied with. All right, now let's continue. I'm going to just jump down to this because I want to hit some points. All right, it says this: if Washington loses its ally in Niger, the new nationalist military government may try to close the foreign military bases and kick out the roughly 1,000 U.S. soldiers in the country. Niger's historically subordinate relationship with the Western powers has not brought the Nigerian people any prosperity. I'm going to read that again. Niger's historically subordinate relationship, all right, basically submitting to this system with the Western powers, has not brought the Nigerian people any prosperity. The country is a major producer of gold, but more than 40% of Nigerians live in extreme poverty. Look at the irony in that. A major producer of gold, but 40% of their people are in poverty. Makes no sense. But the reason, and you'll notice this trend in a lot of these African nations, is the so-called white man pays these African leaders millions and billions of dollars to basically play ball. That's why the Lord told us not to take bribes and gifts. A gift destroyeth the heart, that goes into a bribe, because it perverts judgment. And a lot of these African nations are losing, and they're poor, not because they don't have the resources, but because the people that are in charge have taken bribes, and they're basically in the pocket of the so-called white man. Just like during the Roman Empire, they had vassals, basically puppet leaders that they put over people that they conquered to maintain a power structure. Now let's continue. It says Niger is also one of the world's largest producers of uranium. This radioactive material is crucial for nuclear energy in Europe, especially in France, where roughly 1/3 of electricity comes from nuclear power. Less known is that Niger also has sizable oil reserves. All right, man. This man is wicked, man. When you start to do the research, all right, because this really just scratches the surface. When you really just start to do some research on what's going on, all right, you start to see how wicked and greedy Esau Edom is, man, because he has power over the earth and he has enough resource to not play this game, to not do this to people. But it shows you that his desire is as hell and is as death, and he cannot be satisfied, man. All right. I want to read these last two paragraphs, and I'll put this article in the description. If I forget, Lord willing, remind me. It says it described Niger as a key Western ally and security partner and one of the world's biggest uranium producers, adding that the country is believed to be sitting on 1 billion barrels of crude reserves, according to the African Petroleum Producers Organization. Now, think about this, right? For them to have that much oil, look at what the Ishmaelites were able to do with the oil in their land compared to what the so-called Africans are able to do with the many resources that they have in their land. Just to give you a picture, Dubai is a product of the Ishmaelites being able to capitalize off the oil. Going back to the petro dollar, all right? But it shows you the difference. That if the Hamites were able to get the same or a similar type of deal, that's how the continent of Africa would look in comparison to the rest of the world. Not looking like the poorest country on the earth. Ultimately, that's a judgment on them Hamites for what they did to us as a people. But just to show you the lack of equity, all right, in Esau's rulership. All right, continuing, it says this: S&P Global Commodity Insights noted that Niger has been building an oil pipeline with southern neighbor Benin to transport crude exports out into the Gulf of Guinea and Atlantic Ocean. The country is on the verge of a long-awaited production surge, and an oil industry executive described the pipeline as a game changer. A former State Department official complained to the market intelligence firm that following coups led by nationalist military officers in Mali and Burkina Faso, the governments abruptly nationalized the gold mines, pushing industrial giants out. Soon after the coup in Niger, there were similar reports that the nationalist military government decided to block exports of uranium and gold to the West. All right, and this is modern day tributaries. All right, this just shows you why the war, all right, and why there's conflict in that land, and why you're starting to see a lot of these African nations get new governments or new presidents and prime ministers, because, again, Esau's been able to just pay off their leaders to basically sell their people under the river. And now those things are beginning to change, and not just in Africa. All right, because, again, Esau could crush the rebellion, so to speak. All right. Yet it's happening everywhere. It's not just in Africa. You're still dealing with a situation in the Middle East where a lot of those nations are beginning to band together and realize who the actual problem is. You still have conflict in the South China Sea. All right. So this is just a window into it. All right. This is Joel chapter 3 and verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Because basically what Esau has done is he has spoiled and exploited the people of all these different nations so much that you're just forcing them to a point where they have no other option but to fight. Let the weak say I'm strong. They have no other option. You don't even leave them a grape. And now they're starting to resist. And it's crazy because when they start to resist, the whole news coverage about them is that they're terrorists or that they're wrong for doing this. And this is supposed to be a lesson for the elect of the nation of Israel. All right. Why we shouldn't judge in certain ways, why you're not supposed to abuse your position in the earth if you have been given power over the earth. Because as the scriptures say, the people mourn. But part of people mourning is that they rebel. And it's natural when you got your foot on their neck and you don't give them anything that benefits them in these deals. This is Wisdom of Solomon 6:1. Hear therefore, O ye kings, and understand. Learn, ye that be judges of the ends of the earth. So we're supposed to look at these things, all right, and consider them. Verse 2, give ear, ye that rule the people, and glory in the multitude of nations. Because this is an open classroom for the elect to look at how Esau's ruling and know what not to do. It's a reason why the Lord told us certain things, and it plays out over generations. Because everything that's happening now is from generations of oppression concerning Esau. I mean, generations, hard fought hard labored generations of destroying nations of people to a point where now they're rising up and they're beginning to get more and more violent and desperate because you've given them no other choice. All right. So Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and the sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.